find a balance to where we may not agree with these family members, but we can have a pure love of Christ for them. So that's kind of what started my journey. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about my lineage, and I'll go into a little bit of the history and why Emma stayed in Nauvoo, and then I'll tell you my conversion story. So I'm the second great-granddaughter of Joseph and Emma, through their son, Alexander Hale Smith, who married Elizabeth Agnes Kendall. Elizabeth Agnes Kendall was about 11 when she was abandoned by her stepfather on Main Street in Nauvoo, and she knew where Emma lived because they, as a family, lived with her and Joseph when they first came to Nauvoo. And so initially, Alexander and Elizabeth grows up together and becomes friends before they're ever married, and it made for a really beautiful marriage. Their son, Arthur Marion Smith, is my grandfather. He married my grandma Catherine Smith, totally different Smith line out of Indiana. And my father, Joseph Frederick Smith, he married Mary Sue Roberts, and my mom passed away in 2019. My dad is still living, and he's 90 years old, one of the last great-grandsons. He also has a sister who's 96. So that's how that line goes. Now, I wouldn't be a descendant if I didn't start off with a little bit of humor. So I'm going to tell you a story that's been told on down through the generations. It's a true story. It's been told several different ways down through the lines, and this is how I heard it. It's about when President George Albert Smith was preparing for General Conference one year here in Utah, and he heard that his cousin Israel, who was president of the Reorganized Church, now Community of Christ, was going to be visiting Utah at the same time. So he's like, I'll send an invite to my cousin, see if he'll come. And to his surprise, Israel accepted. So leading up to General Conference, President Smith is telling all his friends and family, my cousin's coming, he's the president of the Reorganized Church. We want to make him feel right at home, and please, let's try not to proselyte him to death. We don't want to scare him away. And so as they're getting ready, seated for General Conference, President Smith has Israel stand up. And he introduces him to everybody, and he says, we just want to make you feel right at home. And he jokingly said, we promise not to proselyte you to death. Now let's start this meeting off with the hymn, Israel, Israel, God is calling. It's funnier depending on which side of the family tells it. It's always a fun story. So to date, there are 2,600 total descendants, 1,900 living, 276 are members of the church, and that includes spouses, so direct converts are going to be a little less than that, and 17 priesthood holders. And also, there's a third of the descendants in Australia. This is because my grandfather's sister, Ina, married a reorganized missionary from Australia who was serving in Missouri. They became very good friends, and after this mission they married and made their home in New South Wales. They had a huge family, and that's why we have about a third of the descendants there. So as I said, I did a lot of research. Initially put into a book that took 15 years for me to write because this was a hard topic to delve into, the conflicts between the Smith cousins in the West and in the Midwest. There were times when it became so hard to read these accounts that I had to put it away for a while because it really had me confused and troubled and at times sick to my stomach. Not that they were just horrible to each other, but it's just this constant influx of arguing about doctrine, in some cases spreading false rumors against one another. But for the most part, these cousins that wrote back and forth to each other, their letters, even though they were staunch in their doctrines, generally ended with in the bonds of familial love or that kind of language. So they still had a family love for one another. And so it made me wonder, okay, where did this really hardcore bitterness come from? And it actually comes in my grandpa's generation, Alexander's son. And as I'm doing all this research, I notice a pattern that the adversary uses to destroy families, and that is division, contention, rumor and misperception, judgment, and the inability to forgive and let go. And that last one's huge for anybody. So forgiveness has become a core theme of my fireside. We were told so many things, and the reason I had a hard time about Brigham Young. Brigham Young had Joseph, Hiram, Samuel murdered. Of course, I don't believe that now, but I was told that as a teenager. And you know, your family knows what they're talking about, and that's what you think. When I did my own research, I found that that was not true. We were told that if you're descendant and you go out west, you'll get killed because there's a conspiracy to wipe us all out. So we all had a huge fear of Utah and a hatred for Brigham Young. And the hatred thing was a foreign thing to me because I've been raised by a mother who had the pure love of Christ like no one I ever met.